You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blaine of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Good afternoon and welcome to another exciting episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. James and I are just really crispy road warriors. We've been on the road for, when did you leave your house to go to the UMA?
I left on a Friday. I got back on a Wednesday, and 2 weeks before that, I was in Philly, and I was there for I think 7 or 8 days. It's been a trek.
So I left for the chauffeur-driven NLA show last Thursday.
Okay.
Last Thursday, I met with my first prospective seller Thursday night, and then I met with 3 local companies on Friday that were actually 2 were local. One was in early that were potential sellers, and so today is Friday, and I guess I'll sleep in my own bed tonight. So. Before we get to the chauffeur-driven NLA show, you went to the UMA, United Motorcoach Association conference, which was in Oklahoma?
Yeah,
okay.
Oklahoma City this year.
Listen, give us your sentiments give us a read on that conference, some of the highlights, the sentiments from bus operators from 24 and how they feel about 25.
So I'm going to pull it back a little bit further because a couple weeks before that, I was at the American Bus Association and International Motorcoach Group.
That was Philly.
And that was Philly, yeah. So that was 8 days in Philly. Then we, being a Kansas City native, we had to kind of give Philly their respect on absolutely trouncing the Chiefs. And then turn around and go right back out. Yeah, what a game! What a game! It was
so.
Brutal.
That was kind of like a sentence for you. 8 days in Philadelphia. That was kind of a sentence. It wasn't really a trip. It was a sentence.
Yeah, and for those of us, for those of us that do a lot of shows, for those of us that work in both sides, the motor coach and the limo, we just kind of get it. There's a lot of people coming over now, but for those that haven't been to either or show. It's really kind of for us an interesting set of shows this time of year because ABA is really designed to take tour destinations and connect them with tour operators. So you have Broadway's got a booth, Branson's got a booth, New Jersey, you've got states, you've got cities, you've got all these different places that are trying to entice the operator to send a tour bus there.
To set up tours, to curate bespoke tours. So, Pennsylvania Amish country might have had a booth, and this is why you need to visit with us. Really, that's interesting. So it's actually a marketplace.
It is. And ironically enough, you've nailed it. It's actually called ABA Marketplace.
Nice.
But the other thing that's unique is ABA has the Bus Industry Safety Council. I'm lucky enough to call a lot of the board members friends and to sit on their executive board myself. So what we do at the Bus Industry Safety Council is while they're doing education sessions, you've got a couple different tracks. And there it's really focused on safety. It's focused on driver qualification files. It's focused on working with FMCSA. It's working, all of the things that are purely safety. So even though you're connecting tour destinations with tour operators, you've also got this pure safety track running. And then as if we haven't had enough going on, you have Trailways and IMG, which are large networks, and they switch back and forth. So they switch between UMA Expo and they switch between ABA's marketplace. So this year, IMG was at Philly. So we have this kind of show within a show that is the exclusive group of IMG and those operators who are really kind of the top of that industry. Those are the operators that are going above and beyond.
That's IMG International
Motorcoach Group.
Okay. And that's private. It's a private group of operators. Yes. I think the best and the brightest of the motorcoach industry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're lucky enough to have worked with one of the larger companies in there. So we were invited in recently. We've been absolutely blessed to get to see what that group's doing and help do it. And for us, it's perfect because that group's whole goal is to be the best of the best. And when you're a company like us that all we focus on is safety and customer service and driving those up to the top level, it really kind of lines up perfectly with our core values. So to kind of bring it around, you've got that show, you've got ABA Marketplace, we've got IMG going on. We come back, we get a little reprieve, we turn around, we go back right, UMA Expo. So we're going down. Obviously, that's not too bad for us. It's only a 4-hour drive from Kansas City down to Oklahoma City. But there's a couple recurring themes that have kind of come up there. The first, I don't care what side of the industry you're on. I don't care what kind of passenger transportation you do. You're absolutely going to relate. And that's insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Insurance.
It's a common thread, right?
It's dominating the landscape. It's dominating the conversation. And it is the number one issue. And one of the interesting things is I was in a session at UMA, and one of the things they talked about is that you can actually get a 15% increase in your rate before they have to actually basically send you a cancellation type notice and say, hey, we're doing more than 15%. And in that room, what I was hearing is 8%, 10%, right? Just under that is what people were saying their increase was. And one of the biggest issues, and someone brought it up in the room, is that it doesn't matter who's at fault. We had an operator in the room, raised his hand, had a question. Hey, I had a bus. Someone came out of nowhere. They basically cut the bus completely off. There was no way it could possibly stop. We ended up hitting that vehicle. All the lawsuits inside of that bus,
oh Jesus,
they're against him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All of the repercussions of that are against him. And I can tell you right now, don't get me wrong, I am all about making sure you've got your bubble, making sure you're keeping your safe space. But one of the things that brought up is we are starting to get to a point, because of the aggressive nature of the insurance landscape, where we're hearing more and more about fraud scams. And it's very tough to guard against someone who's willing to cut 3 lanes of traffic to essentially crash into the front of your bus.
Stop there for a second. So every one of us has seen on YouTube the consumer vehicle or the SUV,
yep.
And then a small vehicle gets in front of them and slams on their brakes. And there's just that person who's driving the car that gets hit is lucky enough to have a dash cam. The end of the day, it's a suicide mission to me. If you are in the livery space or the motor coach space, if you don't have the maximum telematics available, outside cameras in the front, outside cameras in the back, cameras on the side, cameras inside. I mean, I'm sorry. It is legitimately there's no way to do business without it. If you can't afford it, it means your prices are too low, because to me, that's an extra level of insurance, right? And that's evidence that works for you or against you. As Matt Dawes likes to say, if you don't have telematics, the plaintiff's lawyer is going to ask you why. And
Absolutely.
if you do have it and you've not changed behavior and you've not, God forbid if the driver was at fault, if you're not using it to manage your business, you're in deep trouble.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because that kind of dovetails me into bring us a little bit to chauffeur driven, because one of the things that we did see on the motor coach side is there was a little bit more focus on training, a little bit more focus on proactive. One of the things I talk about all the time is you've got your proactive realm and you've got your reactive realm. Now, I've got to be protected in an accident, and I have to have camera footage. I have to have telematics. I have to have everything there. That's my reactive. That's the footage of the accident taking place. But the other side of that, and this is something that the Bus Industry Safety Council did a mock trial on, and something they actually focused on in there, is if you don't have the proactive, the problem becomes that plaintiff's attorney, if you don't have training, if you're not actively training your team how to avoid the accident, 2 things. One, you're going to have more accidents than you should. You're going to have a higher loss rate than you should, because they are going to play like they train. You practice like you play. If you don't have that proactive training in place to teach them what to look for, to take evasive action, to build that safe space around the vehicle, you're at higher risk. The other side of that, though, is even if you have the telematics and you have the whole accident covered, you have the footage, you have the video, as soon as you get to court, the plaintiff's attorney is going to go, well, great. What did you do to prevent this accident? What were you doing to make sure our passengers were safe?
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword, right?
Absolutely.
That telematics can cut for you or against you. Okay. So in this, it kind of bothers me that there are operators, not necessarily the bus guys. I see the bus guys light years ahead on safety. I mean, do you agree?
I think, and I've had this conversation, it came up at Chauffeur Driven. It's because of where you start. And I'm sure you see the same thing in the financials. In our world, if I want to start a black car company, I can go out, I can go buy an SUV from GM, and I can do some licensing, and I'm in business. If I want to start James's bus company, I've got to drop $650,000.
A lot more.
I've got to get audited.
Total barrier to entry. Get it?
Yeah. So you're starting from a point of heavy regulation, heavy safety, higher stakes versus a point of lower regulation, lower stakes, and it kind of molds those operators. But we're seeing a lot of crossover. We had a lot of customers on the black car side that we saw at UMA. We have a lot of people that we saw at UMA that are purely motor coach operators that came to see the NLA for the first time. That line is starting to blur a little bit, and you're starting to see that age of the mixed fleet.
Yeah, and I would argue that you're starting to see a coalescence between the two industries for a variety of reasons. One, I believe that the traditional bus guys are retiring out. There's a lot of very successful bus guys that I know that are above the age of retirement, and they've done well. They've bought their fleet, they've run their fleet, and they own their fleet, and they own the property that they're in, and they've decided, I'm going to either sell or I'm going to wind down. So there's a coalescence happening between the two industries. The second thing that I see that the chauffeur industry has done is the chauffeur industry has raised the bar on service. Okay. No. Well, let's face it, just by being open 24 hours and 7 days a week, because we don't know any better on the chauffeur side. That's what we do, right? Now we're offering where bus companies typically, have a record. Some of them have a recorder on it after 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now we're providing 24-hour service, both reservations and logistics backup. So talk to me about the sentiment of the show, the UMA show. How do people, when was the last time you saw some of them at the ABA, but when was the last time you saw a lot of these guys, and how did they say they finished up in 24? And what was the mood of the show, if you could take a mood?
The mood was pretty good. So we were in Raleigh for the last show, and I think we are still in a period of upward trajectory.
Yep.
A lot of these guys are buying vehicles. We're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing a lot of great things happening. I think the interesting thing that we're seeing, and this ties directly into us talking about the two, is that they are becoming more receptive to figuring out what we're doing. And I think that, and I say we're doing, I happen to live on both sides of the fence. So it's interesting. I switch sides, but the black car side of the industry wants to come to UMA to understand the logistical, the management, and the safety side of how they're managing that many buses, how they're running their fleet, how they're operating it. The motor coach people that I see that are coming to our industry are trying to understand a couple things. They're on the black car side. They're trying to understand the opportunity for sprinters. They're trying to understand the opportunity for controlling the entire transportation experience with that company.
Wait a minute. Back up. Are you saying the motor coach companies are coming to Chauffeur Driven to dip down and now buy vehicles that are smaller?
I have seen, so in this show, we've seen motor coach companies come to the CDNLA show, but at this show, I had a customer that was there looking for the smaller vehicles because they are now in that space.
Interesting.
I had someone else that I've known for basically as long as I've been on the motor coach side that was there looking to understand and learn more about how things are working in the black car space and the opportunity and what they're doing in service levels.
Yep.
But one of the things that is really becoming key is controlling the entire passenger experience for a large client. Because what we've and it came up, we had Maurice on, and Maurice talked about, I had my Apple contract. I had little vehicles. The little vehicles turned into large vehicles because they knew they could trust me. They knew they had a relationship.
Yep.
we're seeing the same thing happen now in reverse.
But I'm surprised at that because I'm very I see the same thing. I don't go over to the. I'm not on the motor coach side as much as you are. I mean, we've got some huge valuations coming up, but we've not. We're members, but we haven't gone to the UMA. But I noticed 2 or 3 companies that we facilitated or assisted with the sale on. They were motor coach companies, but they also went down to minis and vans. I've not seen any yet that have dipped down to providing chauffeured car. I know there was one in Richmond that sold, right, that was motor coach all the way down into chauffeured, but that's rare. Do you think you're going to see more motor coach operators trying to do the diversified fleet role, including chauffeured?
I think it's going to be more, it's not going to be chauffeured the way we think about it. So, for example, I've got a customer that they stepped into that world because of insurance limits and being able to have the insurance carried that the customers there wanted and what they're doing. But I also see, Maurice talked about stepping from
Maurice from
employee
Mosaic.
Absolutely. Maurice from Mosaic, which, by the way, big shout out and congratulations to Maurice and Wanda. They actually won an award at UMA for what they're doing with being forward thinking on essentially the way they're taking care of the environment. And like he talked about, he saw where Apple was going. He went there.
Yep.
He actually won an award.
Yep.
It makes a lot of sense off the back of that one.
Love to hear that.
But the big thing that we're seeing is I see it more taking place with larger corporate clients. I see it more taking place where maybe I'm sending a motor coach out for an employee shuttle and they need something smaller and I don't have something smaller in my fleet. So I go and I grab that and I start doing it. Because what we're finding is there is that want and need to handle all of the pasture ground transportation in one company.
It's smart.
It makes everyone's life easier. And it's been for a very long time. It's been the entry point for the black car guy. Because I go get the contract for Apple, right? And we'll walk through Maurice Brewster's story, right? I go get the contract for Apple for the smaller vehicles. I take great care of them there. I get slightly larger vehicles. You reach a point where they say, hey, we have this partner we know, like, and trust. And those are the keys. Know, like, and trust. And they're providing a level of service that's higher than everybody else. Why wouldn't I want them to just take the whole thing and take care of it for me?
No, and you're speaking about something that is critical, is diversified fleets, diversified clients. But more importantly, we talked about this on the side. My biggest fear for the chauffeured industry and our role of providing corporate ground transportation for the corporate space is some operators have taken a step back from SUVs and sedans. They have basically said, oh, there's too much competition there. I'm going to focus solely on large vehicles. To your point, number one, you have motor coach companies that are doing the opposite now. Yeah. They're coming down into the space, whereas the chauffeured space started going up into motor coaches pre-pandemic. I will tell you, to a company out of the 270 companies that we have reviewed, anytime we see a company that relegates the sedan and SUV to someone else but they want to only pick and choose what they do in the corporate space, their revenue goes down. They lose the corporate market for the reasons you're talking about. He who controls the relationship controls the revenue.
100%.
So if like Maurice, I mean, look, there were so many things about that podcast that were fantastic. By the way, geez. Guys, go and look up it already dropped, right? The Mosaic. Oh, yeah, the Mosaic
absolutely.
Dropped. So
it is a blueprint, right? No, I mean, Maurice lays out a blueprint.
He lays out a blueprint. You're talking about a guy that started in Rolls Royces and talk about a niche. And now he's one of the biggest, I would say, boutique global networks in the country.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And it's because when he captured the customer and they wanted him to provide bigger and bigger vehicles, he just acquiesced and went all the way up to motor coach. No question about it. All right. So give me the overall sentiment of the UMA as far as how did they feel about ending in 24? How did they do?
Right.
And then how do they feel about 25?
I think the sentiment there was really great. I think one of a little bit of a killjoy, but I think you've really kind of identified a couple of their pain points at the moment. We've had an abnormal amount of natural disasters. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of impact there. That was one of the sessions that IMG did a couple weeks prior, was talking about operators that have been hit by natural disasters, from shops getting flooded out and barely being able to ford the water and save your buses,
Yep.
all the way to tornadoes. I mean, you name it, they kind of covered that. And we saw that as kind of an impact. However, there's evacuation work for that. There's things that happen there as well.
Yep.
And I think the overall sentiment is that the industry is really growing. The industry is doing great. Everyone's kind of still on that high, and we expect that to continue through in the coming years. And I think the big thing right now, if you are one of the companies that is poised for growth, it's really locking that in. Because regardless of the industry, what we're seeing is the larger companies are expanding what they have. They're expanding the work they're doing, and they're growing. But the little tiny companies that were relying on that work to come from someone else are now getting squeezed.
Yep.
Because of the fact that if I'm that larger company, I like being able to farm to you. But if I can grow my fleet, if I can grow my driver pool, I can then take that in-house.
That really, what you're saying, absolutely dovetails or parallels directly with what we saw on the financial state of the industry report that we finished.
Yep.
2024, the smaller companies are the one on the chauffeur side are the ones that suffered a little bit. Those are the ones that maybe were 10% or more back. The medium to larger companies that were taking advantage of both vertical growth, expanding new clients, but horizontal growth by offering existing clients more services.
Right.
The medium to large have the ability to do that more than the small. Okay, so let's shift some gears. It sounds like the bus, and I agree, the motor coach side of the business is doing well.
Very well.
There's a lot of market share available, both new growth. I mean, they grow at about 3% compounded annual growth rate a year, which isn't great, but touring is back. Sightseeing touring is back. Charters, line runs, that's all back. And the other piece of the puzzle is market share is going to become available on the coach space because a lot of bus companies are either retiring and closing or they're selling. So that's a good, that's market share churn, if you will. So now you race into Las Vegas and
literally, quite literally.
And what was your sentiments? What was your takeaway from the chauffeur-driven National Limousine Association show?
So for us, I have my blinders on for the first day. We closed down the show floor at UMA at noon. We're off to the airport, flying through Austin. I get there at 6:30 in the evening. I set that booth back up. And that same booth, all of us, we did 2 shows in one day. So I didn't get as many of the Sunday sessions as I would have liked, but I think a lot of the things have carried through. Tim Delaney, Matt Doss, they took up a lot of that insurance presentation. They had their own slides. They had their own deck. Research Underwriters had their COO there.
Yep.
But by the time they got to him, he didn't really have a huge chance to go in. So Matt and Tim were able to kind of take the front of that. And I think one of the things that I've seen is in our industry, speaking to the black car guys, right? It is a reactive industry, and that doesn't appear to have changed. Most of the conversation here was about telematics. It was about cameras. It was about watching what you're doing.
Back up a step and set the stage. Tim Delaney is the president of the largest Lancer Insurance, one of the largest carriers in the industry.
Yep.
If not the largest. Andrew Dawn is the COO of Research Underwriters.
Yep.
One of the largest agents in the space.
Absolutely.
And our friend Matt Dawes, who we did a podcast with him, guys, go back and look at that podcast. It was great.
Incredible.
And we're going to have Matt on again. But Matt Dawes is the preeminent legal mind and the largest transportation practice in the country.
Yep.
So the session at Chauffeur Driven was about insurance.
It was. And really, it was talking about what that landscape looks like,
Yep.
what some of the key root causes are. And look, you can take this from different angles. So depending on who you talk to in our industry, you're going to get a different story. I've heard everything. I'm lucky enough that PAX Training and Lance are our official partners. We work together.
Yep.
I'm very lucky in that I've got to spend personal time with Tim, getting to understand what they're seeing and dealing with.
Yep.
We talk to their safety department on a
Yep.
regular basis.
Yep.
And really, there's some key things, and Tim did a good job of pointing those out. The first is, guys, there's not a lot of people in the space. It doesn't matter if you're on the motor coach side, the black car side, NEMT, passenger ground transportation. We just don't have a lot of carriers.
No, because let's face it, from a financial perspective, last year, for every dollar that they took in for policies, they spent $1.18, right?
Exactly.
So stop saying that the insurance companies are getting rich off this industry. They're not. That's why people are leaving it. That's why people are leaving the states that have no tort laws, right? Like New York, like Michigan, that go in a certain political direction, and the lawyers they have these nuclear verdicts. So his point is, there's only a few carriers in the space to begin with. Okay,
Period.
What else did they go? What else did you get out of that session?
So I think for me, a lot of that was really, really revealing of what I've already mentioned before. We're a reactive industry. We're not a proactive industry. I've built my entire 10 years in this industry helping make companies proactive, trying to get them trained, to get drivers to be ahead of the curve, to try and get to the point where we're preventing accidents. It's the accident never happened. And it really was telling, because a lot of that session was spent talking about telematics, about safety program, about safety culture. Now, I'm in the training space. If it was up to me, the very next session would have been training. And that for me was a little heartbreaking this show. I want to give a lot of credit where credit is due. Lacey, who came from EOS, Mike Sapone, who is a longtime customer of PAX and an absolute incredible business mind.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, the most value for me outside of spending time with my customers, working with them, but just me taking things back, actually came from the EOS session that they did. Anybody that did not attend the EOS session really missed out.
So that was Wednesday's only workshop. That was Wednesday's only workshop. And it was, just give us finish up with the insurance piece though.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that one. So on the insurance side, really the big key takeaways right now tie back to what I was saying with the bus industry. And that's that any claim whatsoever, regardless of how small, regardless of what it is, has the essential ability to mushroom cloud.
Yep.
And so the problem right now, and you already touched on it, is tort reform is there in some states, but it's not in most. We don't expect it to come quickly.
No.
And you have to be proactive. The other big thing, and this isn't something that Tim touched on for more in a moment, but the other big thing that everybody has to realize is what Mike Marcoli brought up in his episode as a broker, him talking about the space and talking about things. You can't take the mindset that the insurance company is my enemy. You can't take the mindset that they're just trying to make a profit off me.
No,
if you want to have that in the back of your mind, that's fine. But you have to actively be working with them, because they know where the claims are going to happen. They know what's going to go wrong. That's why we try to work as closely as we can with them. Because if we know the top 5 things that are causing accidents, the goal here is to play chess, not checkers. You need to be actively doing everything you can to hedge against those, not just have video of it once it happens.
What are those 5?
Oh boy, put me on the spot.
Yep.
So it really is going to depend on market.
Yep.
It's going to depend on vehicle type. It's going to depend on what you have. This isn't something that was covered in the session, so don't feel like you're missing anything. But the most common ones that we hear: following too closely.
Yeah, I had that. Yes.
Big time.
Yep.
Following too closely is a big one. Failure to leave space around the vehicle or be aware around the vehicle.
All sides. All sides. You're
All sides.
You're 12, you're 3, you're 6, and you're 9. Yep.
We call that 360 driving.
Yep.
In our world, you've got a 360 degrees around the vehicle, absolutely everything.
Yep.
I would say that one of the bigger things that I'm seeing, and again, Lance or someone like that that's got the data is going to be able to give you a much more better ordered list. But one of the other big ones that we're seeing is the scams are making their way up the ranks.
That's scary.
Well, especially if you're dealing with vehicles or you're dealing with areas where they can easily identify and spot an opportunity. Man, I've heard stories, and I might have already told this one on the podcast, where someone runs up, they basically throw themselves on the hood of the car, they say, "You hit me." Well, now you're in a situation where they've got an opportunity. They're going to try and drill it through. They're going to move it from attorney to attorney.
No question. I think we should in the future, we should have Tim on directly.
Absolutely.
And one of the safety guys. I mean, what you're telling me from a messaging perspective is these, even if they're 1 or 2 car operators, first of all, if you're a 1 car operator and you drive one way when your client is in the car, and then drive another way when you're racing, this happened to me last night, and the guy was okay driving me, and then I watched him just bolt out of the parking lot, probably to his next
tire smoke
ride. And he cut off somebody. He cut off somebody as he was leaving. Anyway, so proactivity versus reactivity.
Absolutely.
The message, I think from the sessions, because it keeps coming up, they keep having insurance session, is you need to build a case that you are a lower safety risk because you have a defined safety program. You are a customer of PAX. You are examining your telematics and you're changing bad behavior. Yeah, we should have Tim on to go through it. So give me an idea of how you felt. What was the overall sentiment of the operators you talked to about 24? And what's the sentiment you thought about 25? And then we'll talk about vehicles.
So I think there's a little mixed bag, and I'd love to get your opinion on the financial side. A lot of people, the January, February, beginning of year slowdown, one of 2 things I heard. It either didn't slow down as much or we're coming out of it earlier. So I think the overall sentiment is the business is going up. Again, one of the big things, if you're a little tiny, smaller operator, you're not getting that work being sent to you like you were before.
No, because they're going to keep it in house.
Because they're going to keep it in house.
You're the last one. You're the last. You're actually the first one to know, aren't you? Because they're keeping it in house rather than sending it. Yeah.
So we saw a lot of that coming through. I think the other thing is I think we're reaching a point where we've kind of realized that insurance is going to continue to go up. I'm gonna preface this with, there are no insurance discounts at this point. I'd love to tell you I have a magic wand. That you're not going to get an insurance discount.
It's a permanent hard market. It's a permanent hard market, and they won't say it as bluntly as that, but it is. It's a permanent hard market. You've got a budget for at least a 10% increase, and if you don't do your part, literally by creating that safety culture, okay,
exactly,
you're going to get nailed. It's as simple as that. So. Let's talk about the sentiment of the show. Let's talk about the people that you met on the floor. How was their attitude?
I think the attitude was great. I can tell you, big shout out to everyone that came to see us. I don't know that I've ever had that many people coming to see us. I think part of that is the podcast. I'm glad to say it sounds like everybody's enjoying it. I think the other side of that, though, is I think the show floor continues to grow year after year. I think this show continues to grow year after year.
Yep. I agree.
I think the other thing, and we're going to take a little tangent. I had tons of people that actually took me up on my selfie challenge.
So did I.
But I will say, guys, you got to tag us. You got the selfie. You've got it in your phone. You got to tag us. I would love to announce the winner today that we had, right? We were hoping to do that jointly, but we've got all these selfies out in the wild that I don't know where they've ended up. So post those, please.
What is tagging the selfie? What is the process of tagging the selfie?
So there's a couple different ways that you can do it.
Tell us, technology genius.
Yes.
Tell us, Mr. Wizard.
The easiest way to do it is to make a post on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter. now X, whatever your favorite social media is, and then just put the @ symbol and put ground transportation.
That's
podcast.
it?
That's it. And then you just post it.
Whoa. You're telling me this whole thing about tagging. This is a revelation to me because it's not on a P&L or a balance sheet.
No,
You're telling me that I can post a picture and then I can say the @ symbol ground transportation podcast.
Yep.
Okay. We learned something new today.
You can tag individuals that way. So the @ symbol, you can put James, you can put Ken, you can put whoever you want and tag it that simple. And then from that point, it's really easy. You've done it. You've tagged it. Then you can even go into the individual photo and you can actually tag people within the photo. So if you click on the photo, there's it looks like a price tag up in the corner, right? You click that tag and then you can click on the photo and tag people within the photo. Almost every platform is about the same. They all support kind of the @ symbol. We are really, really easy because we have @Ground Transportation Podcast on basically every platform. So
good. So I was invited to the NLA President's Dinner.
Oh, how was that?
It was great. I have to tell you that Eddie McCoy from Fast Track, the software company, his wife Lisa got tied up, which is code to say that she was with her friends and didn't want to go. So Eddie took me as his date. So
poor guy.
I was his +1. Yeah, poor guy is right. And so who shows up? But because it was the President's Dinner, the NLA President's Dinner is anybody who's been on the board of directors at the National Limousine Association gets an invitation. Okay. So the current president, Brett Barinholtz, first of all, he did a great job at the whole show. He was great. Terrific. Obviously, he was a guest on the podcast. Guys, go look at Brett Barinholtz.
Taxis to Limousines. What a great episode.
Great episode.
What a great episode.
So he was on fire that night. He did a great job. But who shows up at the president's dinner but Dawson Rudder and Tammy Rudder from Commonwealth,
who were just recently guests.
And Dawson, they dropped 2 days before the episode. That episode that Tammy and Dawson were on dropped 2 days before. And Dawson comes in and he stops me and he said, everybody's walking up to me saying, great job on the podcast. And I'm like, I don't, and that was a good Dawson impression. But anyway, and Tammy the same way. And I've been meaning to dissect that. I've been meaning to dissect that episode because they dropped some unbelievable truth bombs there. Okay. About treat our customers as if they're yours. We treat you like family. It was great. But anyway, it was terrific to see them. But I will tell you the same thing. I had a lot of people comment on the podcast to the point between that and the fact that we have a lot of things going on. I took my badge off when I was walking through the hallway at the conference center because racing between meetings, I don't know about you, but I was getting stopped.
Oh yeah.
So, I think we have to think about this. I think next year, I think we have to set aside something where we do a meet and greet to
NLA board members. We're talking to you. We would love to have a ground transportation podcast. No, I think I would love to have an event.
Why do I think my credit card's going to have to come out for that? But that's okay. I'm willing to do it.
We'll split the bill on that one for sure.
So a few things happened to me at the show. Number one, people came up to us, both of us, obviously, and said, "Hey, congratulations on the podcast. I listened to it." Other people had suggestions about subject matter. Okay.
There was also a suggestion about my hair. My hairline appears to be receding.
Are we going to go into that? Is that what we're going to do on a Friday? You want to talk about receding hairlines?
I couldn't help it.
Anyway, and especially, and I forgot my special shampoo for 10 days. So I'm lucky I have any hair left. Anyway, so I think that a couple of upcoming sessions I want to tease is we're going to have a week in the life of an affiliate manager. And we're going to have an affiliate manager on from a couple of serious companies. And one of them is going to be Paul from Legends in New York. Paul from Legends Limousine. He's the one who suggested it. And
great idea.
And then I'm going to try to get a couple of others on there. The second thing I'll tell you that's coming up is we're going to have a podcast with the Liros ladies. Okay, let me tell you, if you don't know who the Liros ladies are, from
Set the stage for them, Ken.
out
Set the
out in the
stage.
podcast. Well, first and foremost, the Liros ladies. I met the Liros ladies because last year, at last year's show, we were just coming off selling Liros, a company called Red Oak, very big operator. And that particular deal was difficult, but the guys at Liros always beat the crap out of me, but they invited me to dinner, and they show me some love by surrounding me with the bevy of women that they called the Liros ladies. So I met the Liros ladies and really came to appreciate the fact that they're the frontline customer service people. So they're affiliate people that recruit affiliates. They are customer service people that take care of existing customers. They're reservationists, and their global network reservationist, et cetera. So what they proposed is that they're going to come on the podcast. We're going to make it fun. I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be like, but we're going to make it fun. Just, James, I want you to think about me as Hugh Hefner without the red pajamas. Wait a minute.
Geez.
And we're going to have to.
And we were off track on hairlines. Oh,
right.
boy.
And we're going to have many people on. You're going to see many faces. We'll make it fun, but I'm really enthused about it because we're going to ask them specific questions on how do they overcome price, how do they maintain large accounts, et cetera, et cetera. So look at that. So the show was great.
Oh yeah.
I do feel like I have to hit a couple of things. I was asked to do a presentation for the second year in a row with one of the large affiliate networks, a company called Boston Coach. There were a couple hundred people there, and I did a session. I did a session on selling value instead of low price. And by the way, anybody that wants to email me at info@drivingtransactions.com, info@drivingtransactions.com, and I will invite you to the webinar. Okay, so what we decided to do is we did the presentation, and it really talked about tangible ways to sell value instead of low price. I'm not going to go into in great detail, but it was eye-opening. People loved it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a webinar. I offered to do a webinar because I couldn't go over the whole thing in 30 minutes, but I want to provide an hour long with action items, with worksheets so that you can implement all this stuff. Just to give you an idea, I mean, selling value is not leading off with the price first.
No.
Selling value is stepping back and establishing rapport, relationship, one key.
Yep.
Excuse me, could I have your first name? James, my name is, can I call you James? My name is Ken Lucci. My name is Ken. I'm going to be assisting you today. So just by using your name repeatedly, you've increased the chance that person is going to buy from you by about 30%.
Yep.
So that webinar, we're going to take them all the way through that. And then, but during that session in the Q&A period, I had a lot of people ask me about the sentiment of the economy. So
it's a great question.
I walked away with 3 potential gray clouds, not black clouds, but gray clouds. Now,
could they turn black, or are we thinking they're going to stay gray?
So here's the thing with a gray cloud, right? So a gray cloud could turn black, or it could become a rainbow, right? It can clear and the sun can go out. Go either way. So one gray cloud that I think is going to persist and get darker is the fleet insurance issue.
Yeah. I'd love to tell you that I thought that was going to be a rainbow, but guys, I think
Nope.
I think that's
nope. And we're going to hammer that home. We're going to hammer that home till people get serious about becoming proactive, and they have to understand that it's a cultural thing. And we'll have to get Tim on to go into great detail with that.
Absolutely.
The second gray cloud is this connectivity issue that the thought process arose at the show that I think should concern everybody. And I'm not going to go into great detail because I have to study it, right? And I only heard some Chicken Little kind of stuff, but I'm going to have to figure it out. And we're actually thinking about doing some sort of a position paper. But the idea is that one software company, don't use any names, one software company that is now part of three software companies. They were on their own, and now they're owned by one company, and they're going to create they're going to create hyperconnectivity.
Yeah.
But so that all the data is flowing perfectly between those softwares. So the concern there is what I call connectivity island, which is the connectivity of those software will be great. And then now what happens to connectivity outside the realm of that? And that's what we have to study, right? Because everything I've read about literally talks about improving open connectivity and collaboration with other software providers and total collaboration and cooperation. And the State of the Industry report that we did talked about the fact that there are 6 countries that make up 70% of corporate travel. Okay. And if you read if you go see the webinar, you'll know what they are, but they're the United States, China, UK, Germany, France, and I know there's another one. But anyway.
So let me ask you, how much of this do you think comes from the fact that we didn't have a lot of options in our industry to begin with, right? There's never, you go to, the sales space. Hey, I'm going to go find a CRM, a customer, relations manager. There's a billion of them.
Yeah, they're multi-industry.
Right. How much of this do you think comes from the fact that as an industry we're small? And I guess the other question I'd have for you is, I think, what do you see happening with our UMAs, with the other softwares there that haven't even come over to our world yet? Do you think there's any cross?
Yes. So I will tell you, I left the conference extremely concerned.
Okay.
Very concerned. And I think to give that subject matter, a full attention, it needs to be in writing and it needs to be researched. But I will tell you, connectivity is a great cloud. It only matters if you want to take in work or farm it out. So you want to farm in, right? You're going to receive information, data electronically, automatically versus phone and email, or if you want to farm out. So, and the last gray piece before I get to a real ray of sunshine, the last gray cloud that potentially people were concerned about was the economy.
Yeah.
So right after I did the talk with Boston Coach, the Q&A opened up. I thought I was going to get Q&A about pricing. So I started getting Q&A instantly, and the first question was about the economy. So we, as you know, we're doing the Financial State of the Industry report. We have a summit coming up on April 30th in Washington, D.C. Again, if you want information, it's info@drivingtransactions.com. And we did a huge deep dive. And every single morning I'm on the Economist portal with people that have 50 more IQ points than me. The bottom line is that coming after the election and coming after the first of the year, everybody was really enthused.
Right.
But in the past week, I'm reviewing the Economist portal and I'm seeing things about the chaos factor.
Is this different than what we've seen? Because, coming out of COVID, it was, it's a recession, but it's not a recession. We're worried, but we're not worried. How is this different?
How is this different? I'll tell you, the underpinnings of the economy are fantastic. The underpinnings of the economy since the election, the underpinnings are exceptional. Okay. It's number one, inflation was trending down to 2%. That's what we have to see. Number one is the inflation. Number two, the expectation that the tax cuts were going to be extended. Okay. Now, contrary to popular belief, they're not tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. They're tax cuts for small business people, and small business is the engine of the country. Yeah. Okay. And it directly affects this industry, but everybody still thinks that they're going to come up. And the third issue is to watch the Fed, because if number one happens, the inflation goes down. Number two happens, the tax cuts are extended. Okay.
Right.
the 2017 tax cuts are extended, the third thing will happen, which is the Fed will lower interest rates by, at least twice.
It's the lever they have to pull.
Every economist is practically creaming their jeans over this, right? That trifecta, they're all waiting. Well, see, this is why I have no, that's the way I speak.
We're
right?
officially PG-13 now.
Right. But the economists,
it's a good way to put it.
They're waiting for it. They're waiting for it. They're anticipating. Okay. Well, the last week on, the data portals that I look at, they all started not backtracking, but I think it was almost like you could feel them come back and say, there's
hesitation, maybe.
There's chaos going on in DC.
Okay.
So that was the third thing.
Is this Doge? What's the trigger for this? What is it that has them leery? And is this something where it's trepidation on their part?
I'm going to tell you what it is. It's the unintended consequences of actions taken in DC that sound good, but they have unintended consequences. I'm going to do
butterfly effect.
It is the butterfly effect because, the underpinnings are fantastic, but sentiment is extremely important, right?
Right.
Perception becomes reality pretty damn fast. So it is specifically the Doge thing. And yesterday, today is Friday, and I will throw out the date. It's February 28th. Yesterday, February 27th. Apparently, the government froze all government travel, and they basically essentially cut everybody's credit cards.
And they had already been doing that to a certain extent because I know at ABA, guess what?
Yep.
Cliff and Roger from FMCSA, two guys that are always there. Guys, we can't go. We got our spending cut.
Right.
So they have now completely cut that back then.
Yep. And, and it's the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I think my message to everybody is buy what you need. Do not buy based on a want. Okay. Yes. Use data to drive your asset purchases.
Well, it's the Suburban versus the Escalade that we always bring up, right?
Well, I mean, I'm telling you, I took an Escalade back to the airport with Brett Baronsholtz. I'm a carpetbagger, so I didn't pay for any meals during the entire trip.
I want to be like you when I grew up, Ken.
Ate like a king.
I'm doing client dinners.
I'm standing out there at 5:00 in the morning, and Baronsholtz comes out. I'm like, "Hey, can I grab a?" Of course. And the guy was impeccable, right? And then I get picked up in Tampa, and the guy's in an Escalade wearing a pair of shorts. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, I don't want to get down that road, but buy what you need. And keep cash liquid. Keep yourself liquid, right? So that if in the middle of the year things start going better, fantastic. Maybe you can make a purchase if it's a good deal, but buy what you need and be prudent, right? Don't get caught up in the hysteria of buying and overloading your balance sheet. The one final I will tell you that is an absolute rainbow and a bright spot of the show for me. I'm walking out the door and everybody's breaking down booths, and I'm walking out the door and I see the guys from Magis Software. Have you seen Magis, by the way?
I haven't.
Okay.
No, we were talking about it earlier.
So I see a guy named Leonardo Gianni, and he gives me, and he, by the way, he autographed the book for me, right?
Huh.
Okay. So to Ken, from my first mentor, he's being very candid, very nice. May this book spark innovation in the industry. So I looked at this and he handed it to me. I had finished the book I was set to read. I finished it, the first book that I brought on the trip. So I'm into the first 100 pages of this book. This book is called Mobility 3.0. And it's how to win and thrive in the future of passenger transportation. Leonardo Gannio, Mobility 3.0. And I'm going to say
it is on Amazon. I ordered myself a copy right before we jumped on.
So this book is highbrow. This book is, some of it makes me feel like when I sit with economists on the portal, I'm like, I'm only following every third word. But the reality is this book points to what our industry needs to do. You have to distill it down, but it's a fantastic book. Okay.
I think we can drop a link to that in the show notes.
Well, I'm going to try to get
Amazon.
him on. I actually texted him And because, it was hectic and where everybody was leaving, I texted him when I landed and I said, look, I'm 100 pages into the book. And I think, number one, you need to come on the podcast and you need to distill it down, right? It's meant for the future of all ground transportation mobility, all mobility, public transit, taxi, NEMT, everything. I said, distill it down for the livery space. So we'll leave it at that. But, overall, I think the show went extremely well. I think that, the revelation for me is I think you and I need to do some sort of a meet and greet of some kind.
I'd love to do a fireside chat. I think that would be an absolute blast.
Because a lot of people just had general questions that obviously because they listened to the podcast, and maybe the other thing is we need to do more Q&A on the podcast. Maybe we need a Q&A session. Maybe we need the last 10 minutes to be question and answer. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to get with our producer, John, and figure out what to do. But it seemed to me that a lot of people that were stopping me, it was I want to talk to you about selling my business, which is great, terrific, but not to be done on the show floor. Two, listen, I love your podcast and I just have a question. So I think we need something next year. And maybe it's what we need to do is we need to open up the podcast to, I don't know if we can open it up to phone calls for emails beforehand. I don't know how to do it, but I think the format is working. I always question, because I don't know the podcast business. I always question whether we're being effective, and based on the numbers, John tells me we're going through the roof. And based on the show, I got to tell you, I think that it's a format that's respected. I think it's a format that's needed. I'd like to see us find a way to address those questions, right?
I agree. And I think one of the biggest things is I want everybody listening to us to know that we read every comment. If you guys send us a comment, if you guys send us an email, if you guys, I can't promise we'll be quick. We have so many different platforms, but we take it very seriously and we really love the feedback. And I think for us, this is something that, at some point we may add sponsors, we may kind of try and bring it forward, but it's something that we genuinely see as a way for us to help the industry and help growth and help the entrepreneurship and really kind of bring the stories of our industry to light.
If you listen, and I started listening, even though I hate the sound of my own voice.
Oh, God.
Stand it.
Sound of your own voice is the worst. I can't listen to myself.
Somebody at the show said to me that's pretty common. Somebody that does videos and infomercials. I'm like,
that
okay,
doesn't surprise me.
Right. And I said, did they hate the look of their face too? I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, I will not. If we're talking YouTube, I'm not watching our episodes on YouTube. I have my Apple. I listen to myself in the car like I would anyone else.
So I walked away thinking the industry's doing extremely well. I walked away from absolutely there's more providers this year than last year.
Absolutely.
Worried about those gray clouds, one being the fleet insurance issue, which, look, guys, we have to manage it. Stop bitching about it. We have to manage it.
You do.
Okay.
It's like any other problem you deal with.
The second is, I think the chaos is going to calm down, right? I think at some point, if something slides and the economy starts to slide, I think that the administration will go 5 yards forward to try to make sure that they reverse it quickly. I'd like
and having a financial expert, Ken, how much cash should they have on hand, right? God forbid Chicken Little's right. This guy falls. Should they have 3 months of operating revenue? What should you have on hand?
For 3 to 4 months of operating revenue, fixed expenses, right? So I hate to say it, but if the worst happens, and this industry is known for that, right? We had 9/11 where things absolutely stopped. We had the financial crisis. Now we had the pandemic. Let's learn from the past, people, right?
Right.
You need to have 3 or 4 months of fixed expenses, liquid, hanging out. So
sitting in an account, ready
sitting
to
in
roll.
an account, absolutely. And if you say to me you don't have it, it's very simple.
Sell your boat.
No, it's literally like if you don't have money set aside, they say you should have 6 months of your pay hanging around in savings in case the worst thing happens. If you don't have 3 to 4 months of fixed expenses, your rent, your phone bill, your software, your fleet expense payments, your insurance payments, if that's not hanging out, sitting there in a savings account, your prices are too low or you're overspending in other areas. It's as simple as that. There's no other third choice there. So yeah, I think you should. I think it's very prudent because of the chaos factor. While everything looks up, all of the underpinnings of the economy look fantastic, but there is some unpredictability in Washington D.C. So I think it's prudent. I think it's a good thing, good message to end on.
And I want to zero in on something you said, because, one of my favorite sayings is you always make a friend before you need one. You should always be ready for the worst before it happens. One of the key things I want to point out is you said you should have your 3 to 4 months in your business.
Yep.
And then you should have 6 months of your personal, right?
100%.
So that doesn't mean that I'm expecting to have it all there in the business. It's I need to have an account somewhere for me personally, for my family, for everything I have that's separate.
Yeah, you do.
And I need to have what the business has. And one of the things, at least for me, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Ken, because being an M&A, this is huge. One of the things that came out at the EOS session was, if you're thinking of exiting the business in 3 to 4 years, that doesn't mean that you don't have a 10-year plan for your business. Mm-hmm. You still want a 10-year plan for the business. Can you talk about how that kind of thinking, and I only bring it up because I really want to get that in before we close out. Can you talk about how people need to, now that we've come back from the show, we're in the get it done mode, how do they need to think about that? How do they need to go back and make sure they've got it there?
Well, number one, you have to have a 12-month budget, right? It kind of is astounding to me I never did that before. Great. But you need to have a 12-month budget. And so you've got short-term goals, and then long-term, what do you want to do with the business? When people come to my booth, that's the first thing that I ask them. What do you want to do with this business long-term? Okay. And if you never, ever, ever, ever intend to sell it, my answer is you should still be ready to exit in case somebody comes in and makes you the proverbial offer you can't refuse. But more importantly, in case something happens where you cannot run the business or don't want to run the business or have to exit. So the 12-month budget kind of leads to the 36-month strategic business plan. Okay. You know what your cost structure is. You know what you have for fleet now. The only thing you really don't know is what's going to come in for top line revenue. But past is usually prologue, and you can usually project and forecast with some amount of certainty what your revenue is going to look like. And you certainly, in a 12-month budget, we do slight pivots up or down. But when we do a 36-month strategic plan, have an idea what you're going to focus on, have an idea how you're going to grow your major revenue streams. And as you grow them, have an idea of what you're going to have to add for costs. I'm a little concerned that we are seeing a little bit of a herd mentality, right? Yeah. And I need to buy a motor coach. Well, why? Because I farmed out $100,000 last year. That's not, that's a good example of a strategic plan. A strategic plan says, when I farm out X, or when I have this mini coach paid off, I'm going to keep it for another 12 months, et cetera. So the
1.5 times the work for the bus you're buying.
Correct.
Right?
So
that whole idea.
Correct. The answer is, in 25, to me, my goal would be, if I was an operator, which I tell my operators all the time, would be maximize your existing fleet as much as you possibly can. Try to add 10% to revenue. Like some of my customers that are $100 million, it's difficult to say, I'm going to add 10, right? But in that case, I'd say, why don't you focus on adding 5%, and why don't we try to improve efficiencies? So I think the short-term plan revolves around modest goals that you can hit, including keeping your profitability or improving your profitability from last year, because your cost structure, right? If you know your last 12 months and you've got your final P&L for the year, you can extrapolate it. As far as the 36-month plan, it really is, what are the next steps of the business? I mean, we went through this exercise with a client the other day. He brought in 2 motor coaches, brand spanking new, gorgeous motor coaches. Okay. And I said to him, obviously in 2025, we've got to get those ladies out there making some serious money, right? So we
Wow.
set the goals for those motor coaches, and then we said, okay, at the end of the day, what do you think? What do you think you'd like to do next year or the year after? So that's where the
Right.
strategic plans are. But to me, it starts with revenue goals, and then it's organizational goals, right? It's organizational goals. How do I want to move my business forward? So I thought the education, I know we're going long, but
This is going to be a long episode, guys.
I thought the education was good. I didn't go into each session, but I heard the education was good. I wanted to stay for the EOS session, but I didn't find out about it until I didn't realize he was gonna be doing the EOS session until I had already made my plans. So we are definitely, from a teasing of future episode, besides the affiliate manager and what he looks for in his providers. And we'll get you a couple of those affiliate managers. And besides the Leros ladies, which is going to be my episode of the year, we are definitely 100% going to have Mike Zabone on about EOS.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things I'll warn you about EOS is if you're not serious, if you are not dedicated to building a business that becomes a company, right? Because remember the saying, all companies
Don't want a hobby.
all companies are businesses, but not all businesses are companies. The EOS is a serious financial commitment, but it's also a serious commitment in time and learning, right? So for all my limo owner friends out there that say I've been doing it for 30 years, I don't need to know anything more. All right. It's, as a side note, those are usually the worst businesses that we review is, that kind of thinking. EOS is I was glad it was there this year. And I'm glad that Mike is doing it because Mike Zapone knows the industry. And he showed me the EOS system. I knew about the EOS system. I read a couple of the books that are foundational around it. But I will tell operators it's for the serious.
Yeah.
It's for the serious entrepreneur that wants to turn his business into a company that exists beyond him. So that to me is no, I think that was the best session. That was the best addition that they did this year is adding it. I have my own opinions about the third day. I think that the third day should absolutely 100%, because you're already there.
Yep.
100%. It should be about intensive. Now, you know how I feel about what the intensive should be. And what's lacking in the business. But I can't think of a better one than the EOS to get these guys thinking.
I agree, and I think you've hit on so many great nuggets here that guys. I'm going to warn you right now. We're going to keep this one going just because I want to make sure we hit them. But a couple big things that have jumped out to me about what you've said. The first is that you want to make when it's very hard, and I've seen this in weight loss, right? I've seen this in exercise. It's very hard to look at somebody that is further ahead in their journey and not want to feel like you should be there or you should fast forward. I'm lucky enough. We've had Athena Graham on the podcast. I'm lucky enough to call her a friend and a mentor, and I see a lot of things. I see where she's at, and Athena's very good about making sure that I understand, James, you're going to get there. James, you got to work on where you're at. You got to work on being your authentic self. You got to step into courage. And so what I see a lot of times happen at shows is there's that pressure. It's the Cadillac and the SUV all over again. It's, I need to go buy a motor coach. All right, great. So you have 1.5 times the work stuff. Well, no, everybody's got a motor coach. So I got to figure out how to buy a motor coach. Well, everybody's doing this. I got to figure out how to do this. I think one of the big things at the show that you have to keep in mind is you may meet someone that is at that $100 million business, and you might not even have made it to $1 million in revenue yet. And it can be very hard to say, hey, I'm at this part of the journey, but when they're going to the dinner and they're doing this and they're doing all that and they're, they put $1,000 into that machine on the casino floor like it's $1. There's a lot of pressure to try and keep up that impression. And one of the things that I think is huge at the shows is understanding that you really have to be your authentic self. You really have to understand where you are in the journey, and you really have to work on where you're at and work on getting there instead of trying to give the image that you're there and hyperextending yourself if you're not.
Well,
I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Ken, because that for me has been a big thing that I've learned.
So one of the things I came away with at this show was the fact that the show booth, as far as where we sit, the show booth is a problem. Okay, because my existing customers come and they want to say hi, right? Because everything we do is on Zoom, which is great. They find out that I'm a lot shorter than they think I am. Number two,
get your Tom Cruise shoes. We'll fix that.
Right. Number two, a lot of people wait, right?
Yeah.
The first year, and maybe it's the podcast, this is the first year that I found that people want to come in and spend 20 or 30 minutes, which I think we need. This is why I think you and I need to figure out some sort of an event, meet and greet, ask the questions, whatever it becomes.
Which, by the way, comments, if you guys like that idea, if that's something you'd like to see, let us know,
absolutely.
because we need to know your feedback.
So to your point, though, it's very easy in this industry because we're in the flash business. We're in the limousine business. It's very easy to get caught up in it. Okay. Now you're talking to a guy who, if I had a bride say she wanted a Rolls Royce Phantom, I just went out and bought it. I mean, when I was an operator, it didn't make any, I did that on a bet and thankfully it worked out. But, the idea is it's easy to create that facade of success, right?
Oh, yeah.
The problem with the facade of success is you end up fooling yourself, and then all it takes is maybe 10% drop in business, maybe even less. And you're not just underwater, you're drowning, right? So
with bricks tied to your feet at that point.
So when you say to me, when we walk around the show, there is an element of bravado that I think is unhealthy. And I think there's an element of bravado where people want to walk around and they want to tell you how wonderful they're doing. And, I live in a life of Chinese walls, right? Meaning that's a term that's used on the M&A side, that when you know something, you can't let someone else know that you know that information.
He's telling you he's having the best year of his life, but you just went into the business and you know that he is absolutely tanking. But you can't say that, right?
You can't say that.
We have the same thing in the safety world, right? I see companies all the time. We are the safest. We have the best culture. And I'm going, but when we talk to you, I know your program's not existent, and you won't make a move to fix it. But we can't say that.
We
have that same concept.
Right. You know that they're one accident away from having a massive increase that's going to close them. Yes. And I know that they have less liquidity. They have no liquidity. And if something happens, they can't make their next payroll. But I don't know what it is about human nature. From an entrepreneurial perspective, I think we all want to be perceived as successful.
Absolutely.
But I think that that's kind of, to me, like an 80s or 90s limo mentality, when the business really had it was high rolling. Yep. Greed is good. And there were definitely Cadillacs that were out there, stretch Cadillacs all over New York. I think that's a passé thought process. And I don't know. I would just urge people to focus on the fundamentals. To me, I go to the shows to gather information, to disperse information. The conferences are less to me about they're less to me about you telling me all of the great things about how wonderful the business is. It's more about me asking the same pointed questions to people. How was your last quarter 2024? Did corporate travel slow down for you? Because we're trying to measure sentiment in different ways. But in general, I think we have to expect from the conference that there's going to be a certain amount of bravado. my biggest hope is that we see all those same people back the next year, and they're truly prospering, because there's much different. It's different than posting your Rolex on Facebook than it is being able to make your payroll and not worrying about, or posting your toys or the rest of it. I know everybody wants to do very well and be perceived as doing well, but I think it's more important to, because you have employees that depend on you, it's more important to have true financial stability. So, the last thing I'm going to leave you with is, what do you think would happen to that conference if the conference, instead of being in Las Vegas, was in San Diego or LA or Phoenix?
I think the direct flights would be harder to get.
I get
I think there's so for those that haven't been in the industry long enough to know, that is a show that has been in Vegas for a very long time, and that kind of comes from Bobbit Media and LCT and all the way back.
Mhm.
That was Sarah Eastwood Richardson, who we'll have on in a future date. That was her big show. I
Yep.
mean, that's when she was with
Yeah,
Bobbit
she was at the show this year.
Yeah, she was at the show. I shout out Sarah. I didn't get to talk to her, but it was the big show of the year. It works, I think, from purely a logistic standpoint. I think a lot of that works on the international side, because internationally it's very easy to get to Las Vegas. I think if we moved to a San Diego, if we did something like that, I think the show could be just as successful. But I think part of the allure, part of that is, at least for those flying internationally coming in, it's very easy to get flights to Vegas. That's kind of a traditional location. Like I said, I don't see why it couldn't be just as successful somewhere else. I think we've reached a point where the East Coast chauffeur-driven show is now starting to, it's not quite, at least in terms of my experience, it's not quite the same show. The international attendees don't seem to be as high.
Yep.
But that's a show that's moving around. I mean, at the end of this year, we're going to Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and I think that one needs. I mean, I look forward to it because of the state of the industry sponsorship, and that's the catalyst for us to do next year's report. It's usually the starting process of me, and formulating the report. And I love that show because of it. I think it's a completely different vibe. You're more apt to be able to get us, alone at that show. But I do think we need to be thinking about, kind of a meet and greet session. Maybe we'll try it out in Texas. But if anybody's got some ideas, that would be terrific. So let's put this thing to a close. We've got a few pretty decent podcasts that are dropping. One is Tom Holden from Bus Advisors, from Transportation Advisors. I interviewed him. He's going to be dropping. Coming up, we will definitely have the affiliate manager for the smaller operators who are looking to attract affiliate work. I think that's going to be an absolute showstopper. And then me with the Liros ladies, I think they're going to give you a good idea on how these people, the Frontline, they're fantastic. First of all, Liros is a great company, but Frontline, they deal with clients every single day. So in the meantime, knowing that that's coming up, and their Frontline reservations people and customer service people, if anybody from the audience has questions, send them in.
Absolutely.
If you feel you want to try to overcome objections on price, et cetera, or if you want to start doing affiliate work, I think that would be something that we should talk about. But it's going to be fun. I'm going to leave some of the fun surprises and tell you that is definitely one that everybody's going to want to participate in. And that's about it. It was great seeing you in Las Vegas. We didn't get a chance to spend any time together, even though your booth was next to mine. Every time I looked over, you were busy absolutely. I saw Bruce, once to say goodbye. Yeah. And that was about it. It was like drinking from a fire hose. No question about it.
Yeah. I, being 50-50 partners with Bruce, we maybe saw each other for a minute, because it was one of those shows. You and I saw each other for a minute. So, You know, it was one of those things, you know, you lucky enough to start something wonderful with someone, you build it up, and then, you know, sometimes you get to the point where one of you is running one thing, one of you is running another, and that's just kind of how that plays out. I think we've spent more time, you and I, talking here than we did at the whole show. But
No, and I think we'll call this the double episode because we've pretty much gone to 125 minutes, which is fine. John can cut it up if he wants to, but I think we covered quite a bit. It's tough to compress a whole week's worth of work or the entire show down.
Everybody, thank you for listening. We've got a ton coming. We've got some branding stuff coming. We've got, hopefully we'll keep the insurance conversation going. We've got quite a bit coming down the pipe. So like we said, leave us a comment, subscribe, let us know how we're doing, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX Training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.